Hey everybody, Mike McWilliams, Upstairs to the Right Music Channel. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Every Sunday night, 11 p.m. Central European Time, we have Sunday at Mike's, which is our live stream program. A lot of fun topics we talk about, and I would really enjoy it if you were to join us. Again, that's 11 p.m. Central European Time, so wherever that falls in your day or night, please take the time to tune in. Okay, on to today's subject. I'd like to very briefly talk about the 50s wiring mod and the treble bleed mod that you can do to your humbucker equipped guitars. You can do it to single coils as well, but I think it really shines when you do it on your humbucker equipped guitars. Both of my guitars here are humbucker equipped, obviously, as you can see. And both of them have the 50s wiring modification done back here under the hood, so to speak. And I'll show you that in a minute. But why is this something that you want to do in the first place? You know, there's a lot of jargon out there that can confuse you as to, you know, especially if you're new to guitar. Within the last 2 years, we've had a 400% increase in people who have not only taken an interest in guitar, but have purchased these instruments. And I think that a lot of the jargon out there is kind of designed to confuse you and to make a lot of really simple to understand concepts a lot more complicated than they really should be. And I think that the 50s wiring mod as well as the treble bleed mod are two of those that to just the uninitiated would sound very confusing, and you'd ask yourself, well, why do I need to do something like that? Well, so why would you find the need to investigate or invest, for that matter, into the 50s wiring mod or the treble boost mod? Well, these are really dynamic guitars. My guitar player, Keigo Mizutani, my band in Japan, when I asked him why didn't he play Les Paul, he said, that guitar has way too much power for me. And at that time, I was playing Fenders, Telecasters, as you know. So I hadn't really gotten into humbucker equipped guitars like the Les Paul. Up to that point, his statement was actually one of the things that triggered me into taking a closer look at these guitars. Honestly, because the idea of having all that power, it frightened him. It didn't frighten me. It actually kind of gave me a little bit of a moment. Now, one of the great things about these guitars is that with these two humbucker systems that you have in, for example, Les Paul, you have a lot of dynamic range in the types of tones that you can get out of these guitars. Unfortunately, with the current modern wiring system for Les Pauls, for example, you lose a lot of definition in your high end when you start rolling back the volume on these guitars. Now, why is that? That's because the circuit, the modern wiring that you'll find in almost all your modern Les Pauls, unless they specifically say they have 50s wiring, is based on a circuit where you're really just using the volume just as for what it is. It's just a way of reducing the overall sound that you're getting from your humbuckers. It by no means is a bad thing, and it's quite usable all in itself. However, as you begin to lower the volume on your humbucker equipped guitar, you start to notice a dulling. The high end starts to go away. That's what the old 50s wiring used to compensate for. It used to be a way of wiring these guitars so that even when you lowered your volume on your volume pots on your neck or your bridge pickup, you would still have great clarity in your overall tone. This is what the 50s wiring method did for you. It gave you clarity in your volume, whether you were all the way up at 10 or even cruising all the way down to 0.5. So even here at just before 0, you still have clarity in your signal. That's evident as you raise it up to 10. Now back to 0. See? You just still had that clarity of tone coming out of your guitar. Now, why was this wiring method abandoned and gone over to the modern way of wiring? Honestly, again, it's penny pinching and cost saving. It takes a little bit more time and effort in order to do that relatively simple wiring modification, but these are extra pennies that a lot of manufacturers don't want to spend. Fortunately, you can do it yourself at home if you have any wiring experience, or you can take it down to your local luthier and they can do it for you, or there's a lot of companies that sell pre-wired kits that are already set up with the 50s wiring. Let's take a look inside of this guitar and see what I've done. Okay, so here is your basic inner workings of a Les Paul. Very clean cavity, as you can see. It did not come from the factory like this. I had this completely rewired. At this point, I don't think that there's any of the original factory wiring or pots back here. However, because it's so cleanly done, it makes this a great way of demonstrating what exactly 50s wiring with braided tube conductor wire is. Essentially, it's connecting your neck volume pot to your neck tone pot, and then connecting your neck tone pot to your bridge tone pot. And this is done using, as I said, braided vintage two conductor wiring, which this is right here. This is vintage braided two conductor wiring. So this L-shaped connection between this neck volume pot with the neck tone pot, and then the neck tone pot to the bridge tone pot, this L-shaped wiring is 50s wiring. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, when you do this, there's a lot less treble loss when you're rolling the guitar volume back. Many feel that this is really the key to having a true 50s Les Paul sound, is having this wiring done. Now, they stopped doing this type of wiring in the 1970s at Gibson, and they've turned it into the so-called modern wiring, where you don't have this L connection between these pots. L connection, again, this wire, and then this wire basically makes an L. Is it necessary to have 50s wiring? Yes, I think so. I think having that kind of control over your volume pots is really key to getting a lot of different sounds out of your Les Paul. Now, there's another mod that you can do, and that occurs right here in your neck volume pot. See these two connectors here? Well, if you connect these two together using a clip or some kind of conductive cap, which they do sell, that's when you have what's called a treble bleed mod. And this again is another way of getting rid of the treble loss. For example, if you had a really muddy neck pickup, then if you did that connection, which would occur between these two right here, if you connected those together, then you would have what's called a treble bleed mod. And again, if you find yourself with a particularly muddy neck pickup, that is the best way to go about, other than, of course, adjusting the heights of your pickup. You do adjust your pickup heights, don't you? That's another way of taking care of a muddy neck pickup. I haven't done that. I'm considering doing it. As you can see, it's such a simple mod that you can do it yourself, so it's not a big deal. But I did do the 50s wiring back here, and it is really the key, I think, into getting a vintage Les Paul sound out of your Les Paul. Okay, so we had the chance to take a look at the under the hood, so to speak, of this guitar, so you can see what a 50s wiring job looks like. It is the same over here for my Harley Benton. I've done exactly the same thing. Both of these have 50 wiring when it comes back in the back of the harness. Now the treble bleed mod that I also briefly discussed there, its main purpose is very similar to the 50s wiring mod where you retain your treble going up and down, but what it does, if you find yourself with a particularly dark neck pickup, what it can do is really give you a lot more clarity in your neck pickup. A lot of people will complain and say, well, you know, my neck pickup is really muddy. You'll hear that term. Now, I see the 50s wiring mod as being essential. I do not see the treble bleed mod as being an essential thing to do, and I'll tell you why. If you're finding that you have a particularly muddy neck pickup, chances are you need to experiment with lowering and raising the height of that pickup. There's also things that you can do in terms of staggering your pole pieces here on the neck pickup. There's a lot of different adjustments that you can make first before you even consider doing the treble bleed mod. A lot of people will say, well, my neck pickup is no good, and they'll just toss it out and try something else. And unless they make those kind of adjustments to find the so-called sweet spot on that neck pickup, I don't even think replacing pickups is really going to help you. You probably got a great pickup, you probably just need to adjust the height on it. So I think that the treble bleed mod is something that you can do. It certainly will help give you clarity in your neck pickup, but it's not something that I think is essential to do. The 50s wiring modification on any humbucker equipped guitar, I think, is the way to go. I don't own a humbucker guitar now that doesn't have 50s wiring to it. And the reason again is so that I can have that great dynamic range in my taper or my volume here. You can then see the power of these guitars, especially when in conjunction with your tone pot, when you start making these slight adjustments. For example, I usually ride my tone pot between 6 and 7. And I ride my volume up depending upon where I want, and I can get a large range of tones just within that small band as long as I have this 50s wiring. So it's something to consider, something that you should think about doing. Again, it's a very inexpensive modification to do. You just needed shielded true braid wiring and a good soldering gun, and you're good to go to get started in doing that. Again, the treble bleed modification is something equally as easy, and certainly I encourage you to try it, but I don't think that it's going to give you the kind of results that the 50s wiring modification will give you. All right, I hope that this brief explanation of what this modification or these two modifications that I was just talking about do for you, and as to whether or not they are something that you find appropriate for you and your setup, I'll leave that up to you. For me and mine, absolutely, I couldn't live without having 50s wiring. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I love this Epiphone Les Paul 59 when it came out of the box is because it came out of the box with 50s wiring. It was really good to go. Yeah, sure, I've made some changes to it, but that was just really to improve on what was already done, which was pretty cool. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's show and this brief explanation of the 50s wiring modification and the treble bleed modification. Please join us for our live stream coming up this Sunday, and until then, you guys take care. Bye-bye.